Dhanava Pranam. Namaste. Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Canto 1 Creation, Chapter 15, Text 12. Yate jasata Bhagavan Yate jasata Bhagavan Yudhi Shula Panir Vishmapita Sagirijo Strum Adani Jame Anye Pichaham Amunaiva Kale Varena Prapto Mahendra Bhavane Mahad Asandam. It was by his influence only that in a fight I was able to astonish the personality of God, Lord Shiva, and his wife, the daughter of Mount Himalaya. Thus he, Lord Shiva, became pleased with me and awarded me his own weapon. Other demigods also delivered their respective weapons to me, and in addition I was able to reach the heavenly planets in this present body, and was allowed a half-elevated seat. Purport. By the grace of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, all the demigods, including Lord Shiva, were pleased with Arjuna. The idea is that one who is favored by Lord Shiva or any other demigod may not necessarily be favored by the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. Ravana was certainly a great devotee of Lord Shiva, but he could not be saved from the wrath of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Ramachandra. And there are many instances like that in the histories of the Puranas. But here is an instance where we can see that Lord Shiva became pleased even in the fight with Arjuna. The devotees of the Supreme Lord know how to respect the demigods, but the devotees of the demigods sometimes foolishly think that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is no greater than the demigods. By such a conception, one becomes an offender and ultimately meets with the same end as Ravana and others. The instances described by Arjuna during his friendly dealings with Lord Sri Krishna are instructive for all who may be convinced by the lessons that one can achieve all favors simply by pleasing the Supreme Lord Sri Krishna, whereas the devotees or worshippers of the demigods may achieve only partial benefits, which are also perishable, just as the demigods themselves are. Another significance of the present verse is that Arjuna, by the grace of Lord Sri Krishna, was able to reach the heavenly planet even with the self-same body, and was honored by the heavenly demigod Indradev, being seated with him half-elevated. One can reach the heavenly planets by the pious acts recommended in the Shastras, in the category of fruitive activities, and as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 9.21, when the reactions of such pious acts are spent, the enjoyer is again degraded to this earthly planet. The moon is also on the level with the heavenly planets, and only persons who have performed virtues, performing sacrifices, giving charity, and undergoing severe austerities, can be allowed to enter into the heavenly planets after the duration of life of the body. Arjuna was allowed to enter into the heavenly planets in the self-same body simply by the grace of the Lord. Otherwise it is not possible to do so. The present attempts to enter into the heavenly planets by the modern scientists will certainly prove futile because such scientists are not on the level of Arjuna. They are ordinary human beings without any assets of sacrifice, charity, or austerities. The material body is influenced by the three modes of material nature, namely goodness, passion, and ignorance. The present population is more or less influenced by the modes of passion and ignorance, and the symptoms for such influence are exhibited in their becoming very lusty and greedy. Such degraded fellows can hardly approach the higher planetary systems. Above the heavenly planets there are many other planets also, which only those who are influenced by goodness can reach. In heavenly and other planets within the universe, the inhabitants are all highly intelligent, many more times than the human beings, and they are all pious in the higher and highest mode of goodness. They are all devotees of the Lord, and although their goodness is not unadulterated, they still are known as demigods possessing the maximum amount of good qualities possible within the material world. Text 13. Tatraiva me biharato bujja danda yugmam gandhiva lakshanam arati vadhaya deva sandrashrita yadanubhavitam ajamida tenaham adyamushita purushena bhumna. When I stayed for some days as a guest in the heavenly planets, all the heavenly demigods, including King Indradev, took shelter of my arms, which were marked with Gandhaiva bow, to kill the demon named Nivatakavaka. O king, descendant of Ajamidha. At the present moment, I am bereft of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose influence I was so powerful. Purport. The heavenly demigods are certainly more intelligent, powerful, and beautiful, and yet they had to take help from Arjuna because of his Gandhaiva bow, which was empowered by the grace of Lord Sri Krishna. The Lord is all-powerful, and by his grace his pure devotee can be as powerful as he may desire, and there is no limit to it. And when the Lord withdraws his power from anyone, he is powerless by the will of the Lord. Text 14. Yad Pāṇḍava kuru bala dim ananta param eko ratena tattare ham atirya sattvam pratyahritam bahudhanam shamaya parisham tejas padam manimayam cha hritam shirobhya. The military strength of the Kauravas was like an ocean in which there dwelled many invincible existences, and thus it was insurmountable. But because of his friendship, I, seated on the chariot, was able to cross over it, and only by his grace was I able to regain the cows, and also collect by force many helmets of the kings, which were bedecked with jewels that were the sources of all brilliance. Purport. On the Kaurava side, there were many stalwart commanders like Bhisma, Drona, Kripa, and Karna, and their military strength was insurmountable as the great ocean. Yet it was due to Lord Krishna's grace that Arjuna alone, sitting on the chariot, could manage to vanquish them one after another without difficulty. There were many changes of commanders on the other side, but on the Pandava side, Arjuna alone on the chariot, driven by Lord Krishna, could manage the whole responsibility of the great war. Similarly, when the Pandavas were living at the place of Virata incognito, the Kauravas picked a quarrel with King Virata and decided to take away his large number of cows. While they were taking away the cows, Arjuna fought with them incognito and was able to regain the cows along with some booty taken by force. The jewels set on the turbans of the royal order. Arjuna remembered that all this was possible by the grace of the Lord. Text 15. Yo Bhisma Karna Guru Shalya Cham Suvadhabra Rajanya Varya Rata Mandala Manditasu Agrecharo Mamavibho Rata Yutapanam Ayurmanam Sichadrisha Saha Oja Archat. It was he only who withdrew the duration of life from everyone, and who in the battlefield withdrew the speculative power and strength of enthusiasm from the great military phalanx made by the Kauravas, headed by Bhisma, Karna, Drona, Salya, etc. Their arrangement was expert and more than adequate, but he, Lord Sri Krishna, while going forward, did all this. Purport. The absolute personality of Godhead, Lord Sri Krishna, expands himself by his plenary Paramatma portion in everyone's heart, and thus he directs everyone in the matter of recollection, forgetfulness, knowledge, the absence of intelligence, and all psychological activities. As the Supreme Lord, he can increase or decrease the duration of life of a living being. Thus the Lord conducted the battle of Kurukshetra according to his own plan. He wanted that battle to establish Yudhisthira as the emperor of this planet and to facilitate this transcendental business. He killed all who were on the opposite party by his omnipotent will. The other party was equipped with all military strength, supported by big generals like Bhisma, Drona, and Salya, and it would have been physically impossible for Arjuna to win the battle had the Lord not helped him by every kind of tactic. Such tactics are generally followed by every statesman, even in modern warfare, but they are all done materially by powerful espionages, military tactics, and diplomatic maneuvers. But because Arjuna was the Lord's affectionate devotee, the Lord did all this himself without personal anxiety by Arjuna. That is the way of the devotional service to the Lord. Text 16. Yadhoshuma pranihitam guru bhisma karna naptritirgarta salya saindhava balikadhyai astranyamo kamahimani nirupitani nopaspurshur nerdhari dasam eva surani. Great generals like Bhisma, Drona, Karna, Bori, Shrava, Susharma, Salya, Jayadratha, and Balika all directed their invincible weapons against me. But by his, Lord Krishna's grace, they could not even touch a hair on my head. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj, the supreme devotee of Lord Nrsimhadev, was unaffected by the weapons the demons used against him. Purport. The history of Prahlad Maharaj, the great devotee of Nrsimhadev, is narrated in the 7th canto of Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam. Prahlad Maharaj, a small child of only 5 years, became the object of envy for his great father, Hiranyakashipu, only because of his becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. The demon father employed all his weapons to kill the devotee's son, Prahlad. By the grace of the Lord, he was saved from all sorts of dangerous actions by his father. He was thrown in a fire and boiling oil from the top of a hill underneath the legs of an elephant, and he was administered poison. At last the father himself took up a chopper to kill his son, and thus Nrsimhadev appeared and killed the highness father in the presence of the son. Thus no one can kill the devotee of the Lord. Similarly, Arjuna was also saved by the Lord, although all dangerous weapons were employed by his great opponents like Bhisma. Karna. Born of Kunti by the sun god prior to her marriage with Maharaj Pandu, Karna took his birth with bangles and earrings, extraordinary signs for an undaunted hero. In the beginning, his name was Vashusena, but when he grew up, he presented his natural bangles and earrings to Indradev, and thenceforward he became known as Vaikartana. After his birth from the maiden Kunti, he was thrown in the Ganges. Later he was picked up by Adhiratha, and he and his wife Radha brought him up as their own offspring. Karna was very charitable, especially toward the Brahmanas. There was nothing he could not spare for a Brahmana. In the same charitable spirit, he gave in charity his natural bangles and earrings to Indradev, who, being very much satisfied with him, gave him in return a great weapon called Shakti. He was admitted as one of the students of Dronacharya, and from the very beginning there was some rivalry between him and Arjuna. Seeing his constant rivalry with Arjuna, Duryodhana picked him up as his companion, and this gradually grew into greater intimacy. He was also present in the great assembly of Draupadi's Svayamvara function, and when he attempted to exhibit his talent in that meeting, Draupadi's brother declared that Karna could not take part in the competition because of his being the son of a Sudra carpenter. Although he was refused in the competition, still, when Arjuna was successful in piercing the fish target on the ceiling, and Draupadi bestowed her garland upon Arjuna, Karna and the other disappointed princes offered an unusual stumbling block to Arjuna while he was leaving with Draupadi. Specifically, Karna fought with him very valiantly, but all of them were defeated by Arjuna. Duryodhana was very much pleased with Karna because of his constant rivalry with Arjuna, and when he was in the power, he enthralled Karna in the state of Anga. Being baffled in his attempt to win Draupadi, Karna advised Duryodhana to attack King Drupada, for after defeating him, both Arjuna and Draupadi could be arrested. But Dronacharya rebuked them for this conspiracy, and they refrained from the action. Karna was defeated many times, not only by Arjuna, but also by Bhimasena. He was the king of the kingdom of Bengal, Orissa, and Madras combined. Later on, he took an active part in the Rajasuya sacrifice of Maharaj Yudhisthira, and when there was gambling between the rival brothers designed by Shakuni, Karna took part in the game, and he was very pleased when Draupadi was offered as a bet in the gambling. This fed his old grudge. When Draupadi was in the game, he was very enthusiastic to declare the news, and it is he who ordered Dushasana to take away the garments of both the Pandavas and Draupadi. He asked Draupadi to select another husband because, being lost by the Pandavas, she was rendered a slave of the Kurus. He was always an enemy of the Pandavas, and whenever there was an opportunity, he tried to curb them all by all means. During the battle of Kurukshetra, he foresaw the conclusive result, and he expressed his opinion that due to Lord Krishna's being the chariot driver of Arjuna, the battle should be won by Arjuna. He always differed with Bhisma, and sometimes he was proud enough to say that within 5 days he could finish up the Pandavas if Bhisma would not interfere with his plan of action. But he was much mortified when Bhisma died. He killed Gatotkacha within the Shakti weapon obtained from Indradev. His son Vrishashena was killed by Arjuna. He killed the largest number of Pandava soldiers. At last there was a severe fight with Arjuna, and it was he only who was able to knock off the helmet of Arjuna. But it so happened that the wheel of his chariot stuck in the battlefield mud, and when he got down to set the wheel right, Arjuna took the opportunity and killed him, although he requested Arjuna not to do so. Napta, or Borishrava. Borishrava was the son of Somadatta, a member of the Kuru family. His brother was Salya. Both the brothers and the father attended the Svayamvara ceremony of Draupadi. All of them appreciated the wonderful strength of Arjuna due to his being the devotee friend of the Lord, and thus Borishrava advised the sons of Dhritarashtra not to pick any quarrel or fight with them. All of them also attended the Rajasuya Yagya of Maharaj Yudhishthir. He possessed one Akshuhini regiment of army, cavalry, elephants, and chariots, and all these were employed in the battle of Kurukshetra on behalf of Duryodhana's party. He was counted by Bhima as one of the Yuttapatis. In the battle of Kurukshetra, he was especially engaged in a fight with Satyaki, and he killed 10 sons of Satyaki. Later on, Arjuna cut off his hands, and he was ultimately killed by Satyaki. After his death, he merged into the existence of Vishvadeva, Trigarta, or Susharma, the son of Maharaj Vridhakshetra. He was the king of Trigarta Desh, and he was also present in the Svayamvara ceremony of Draupadi. He was one of the allies of Duryodhana, and he advised Duryodhana to attack the Matsya Desha, Darbhanga. During the time of cow stealing in Virat Nagar, he was able to arrest Maharaj Virat, but later Maharaj Virat was released by Bhima. In the battle of Kurukshetra, he also fought very valiantly, but at the end he was killed by Arjuna. Jayadratha, another son of Maharaj Vridhakshetra. He was the king of Sindhudesh, modern Sindh, Pakistan. His wife's name was Dushala. He was also present at the Svayamvara ceremony of Draupadi, and he desired very strongly to have her hand, but he failed in the competition. But since then he always sought the opportunity to get in touch with Draupadi. When he was going to marry in the Salya Desh on the way to Kamyavan, he happened to see Draupadi again and was too much attracted to her. The Pandavas and Draupadi were then in exile after losing their empire in gambling, and Jayadratha thought it wise to send news to Draupadi in an illicit manner through Kotisasya, one of his associates. Draupadi at once refused vehemently the proposal of Jayadratha, but being so much attracted by the beauty of Draupadi, he tried again and again. Every time he was refused by Draupadi. He tried to take her away forcibly on his chariot, and at first Draupadi gave him a good dashing, and he fell like a cut-root tree. But he was not discouraged, and he was able to force Draupadi to sit on the chariot. This incident was seen by Daumya Muni, and he strongly protested the action of Jayadratha. He also followed the chariot, and through Datrayika, the matter was brought to the notice of Maharaj Yudhishthir. The Pandavas then attacked the soldiers of Jayadratha and killed them all, and at last Bhima caught hold of Jayadratha and beat him very severely, almost dead. Then all but 5 hairs were cut off his head, and he was taken to all the kings and introduced as the slave of Maharaj Yudhishthir. He was forced to admit himself to be the slave of Maharaj Yudhishthir before all the princely order, and in the same condition he was brought before Maharaj Yudhishthir. Maharaj Yudhishthir was kind enough to order him released, and when he admitted to being tributary prince under Maharaj Yudhishthir, Queen Draupadi also desired his release. After this incident, he was allowed to return to his country. Being so insulted, he went to Gangotri, in the Himalayas and undertook a severe type of penance to please Lord Shiva. He asked his benediction to defeat all the Pandavas, and at least one at a time. Then the battle of Kurukshetra began, and he took sides with Duryodhana. In the first day's fight, he was engaged with Maharaj Drupada, then with Virat, and then with Abhimanyu. While Abhimanyu was being killed mercilessly, surrounded by 7 great generals, the Pandavas came to his help. But Jayadratha, by the mercy of Lord Shiva, repulsed them with great ability. At this, Arjuna took a vow to kill him, and on hearing this, Jayadratha wanted to leave the war field and ask permission from the Kauravas for this cowardly action. But he was not allowed to do so. On the contrary, he was obliged to fight with Arjuna, and while the fight was going on, Lord Krishna reminded Arjuna that the benediction of Shiva upon Jayadratha was that whoever would cause his head to fall on the ground would die at once. He therefore advised Arjuna to throw the head of Jayadratha directly onto the lap of his father, who was engaged in penances at the Samanta Panchaka pilgrimage. This was actually done by Arjuna. Jayadratha's father was surprised to see a severed head on his lap, and he at once threw it to the ground. The father immediately died, his forehead being cracked in 7 pieces. Thus ends our reading for today. We will continue from text 17 on Friday, hopefully. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Niskam Shanta Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Shripad Bhakti Vigyan Muni Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Shripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Nirmala Charya Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Rakshak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. All glories to Om Vishnu Pad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada Ki Jai. All glories to Arupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees Ki Jai. Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the worldwide devotees. All glories to Nishinga Palidam Ki Jai. All glories to Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Ekachakra Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Baladev Subhadra Jagannath Jew Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Giri Govardhan Gupta Govardhan Dham Ki Jai. Sham Kund Radha Kund Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Bhakti Devi Vrinda Devi Ki Jai. Nitai Gora Pramanandi Hari 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 Bo. All glories to the Adibas Day of the Avirbhav Mahotsav of His Holiness Sripad Bhakti Madhava Puri Maharaj Ki Jai. Hare Krishna. Dandavat Pranam.